Hello, everybody. Happy Friday. Good to be with you. It is just Ryan Breton today. Obviously, solo in the evenings this week. But given everything that happened on Thursday, of course, we had no episode because, frankly, all hell broke loose between 3 and 4 o'clock, and we record this at 3:30. I have so much to talk about, and I wanted to dig into what really unfolded. And I recognize I didn't change the background behind me, but we'll roll with it. Take a look. This is some of the storm damage. We're going to go over what happened with this thunderstorm, what caused the damage. But by now, I'm sure you've seen so many of these pictures and videos. There were hundreds of trees down in South Portland and Cape Elizabeth. We don't even know what went down in the woods, frankly. There were so many across roads, on homes. And to me, the interesting thing was so many uprooted trees. It wasn't just limbs coming down. But no matter where you went, from the Pleasant Hill area all the way to South Portland High School and then up toward the middle of Cape Elizabeth near the Cape schools, a ton of damage. And like I said, a lot of these trees just uprooted. And this was all from a thunderstorm that frankly was not that impressive between 2 and 3 o'clock. It actually formed up on a line near about Bridgeton around 1 o'clock. And there was a weak line of thunderstorms. And the line ended up going east while this cell kind of broke off and went south. And when it went through Sebago Lake, it was producing some rain and lightning. We had one report of pea-sized hail out of Otis Field, but nothing to the extent that it was when it hit Westbrook. It just seemed to flare up there. And because it was a northwest to southeast moving storm, it really wasn't influenced by the ocean. A lot of times when you get storms to the coast, they tend to weaken because they hit a marine layer or something like that. We didn't really have that yesterday. It was a northwest wind coming down from the land, and it actually strengthened on approach to Portland. If you give me a moment, I do want to talk a little bit about the Doppler radar, and this gives us a great opportunity to show the problem that we have with the radar in gray. If you've been with us many times, we've talked about how there are trees on the southern side of the radar in gray that block the lowest beam of the radar, which is what we generally use. And if you're looking at this image, it doesn't really look like a super impressive storm. So what we had to do was actually use the Boston radar. That's how poor the reception is now over the Portland area of the gray radar. And you can see the dark purples there. When I saw that, I knew this thing was producing a lot of hail. And it turned out to be even more hail than I frankly could have envisioned. Let me see if I still have, I think it's this. Yeah, this is from the Portland-Westbrook line off Brighton Avenue. Combination of so much hail. It wasn't massive in size, but there were massive amounts of it, plus the heavy rain. Clogged up the storm drains, and you had these like icebergs of hail. And there's one other video here. This is from Chris. He owns All Speed, which is right there, the ski and bike shop. And it was like driving through icebergs of hail in the aftermath. And if you saw Bailey Kornick there, she was there through 6 o'clock, and it hadn't even melted at that point. The hail just all kind of congealed together. That's something to see. That's not something that we have very often. But to my point about the radar, if we weren't using the gray radar, if we weren't using the Boston radar and we were relying exclusively on the gray radar, we wouldn't have had the same idea of how significant the hail was. So that kind of made it a challenge in the moment. And I did a story 6 years ago about how the trees are blocking the radar. They're on private land. They're trying to come up with solutions. I think some solutions are in the works, but I hope this thunderstorm is an example of how serious the problem is. Because frankly, you shouldn't have to rely on a radar that's in Taunton, Massachusetts to pick up a storm that's in Portland when there's a radar 10 to 15 miles up the road in gray. But that was one of the challenges we had in real time dealing with the storm. Nonetheless, we were able to use the Boston radar with the gray radar below it to try to get a sample. Now we're going to switch to the velocity mode of the radar, and if you follow severe weather, you know that with tornadoes, we use this and we look for red and green. In this case, red is wind going away from the radar. Let me draw this again. So in this case, we can use the radar in gray, but red is wind going away from the radar. If there were green here, that would be wind going toward the radar. And in this case, all the colors are red, which is telling me this is all motion in one direction, generally away from the radar. So this wasn't caused by a tornado, but what happened was we had a downburst of strong wind after this went through Westbrook. You can see the velocity readings. I'll go back to the beginning. We're in the 40 mile per hour range, and there was some tree damage around Gorham and Westbrook, but it really was as this crossed over the jetport, the values on the reflectivity here spiked to 64 miles per hour, and we had an actual reading from the jetport of a 69 mile per hour wind gust, and also a wind gust on a weather station in Cape Elizabeth of 80 miles per hour. As of this afternoon, the Weather Service has not declared this a microburst. In my view, the damage is representative of a microburst, and I believe it's safe to call it that based on talking to all the meteorologists that I chatted with, be it Christian Bridges, Keith Carson, Jess Conley. They were looking at the structure of the storm and could tell there was like a downburst of rain and wind, and we experienced it in downtown Portland, and it was just that much worse in South Portland and Cape Elizabeth. On the radar, a true downburst signature would have had some green going this way, away from the red, and the red still going that way. That would indicate the wind's fanning out. We didn't have that on the radar here, but when you put it all together, I think to the average person, this is pretty clear that we had some type of downburst or microburst, and the scope of the damage was beyond comprehension, really, in parts of South Portland and Cape Elizabeth. So this is how these work. All thunderstorms have an updraft. In other words, air that's getting sucked into the thunderstorm. And when that updraft is strong, it sustains raindrops up in the cloud. And if they're up in the cloud long enough and they freeze, that's how you form hail. Well, then that updraft begins to weaken, and either the hail falls out because it's now too heavy for it to hold it up there, and the air is cooling up in the thunderstorm too. So you get a downdraft out of the storm. But sometimes that downdraft can get really localized and focused. And this is what we call a downburst of wind. The air hits the ground, it's forced out in all directions, straight line wind. And in this case, wind gusts of 70 to 80 miles per hour. But sometimes these can be like 100 or 150 miles per hour. And a lot of the research into microbursts actually came from aviation, because it can be a real problem for aircraft if you get caught in a microburst. So that's especially true out like in Colorado. There were some really bad microbursts, and that's where a lot of the research took place. But I think it's safe to say this was at very least a downburst, and it was within about a 2.5 mile span where the worst damage was. So I think it's safe to call this a microburst. Like I said, the Weather Service hasn't really declared it one, and I think that if there is a reason, it's because on the radar they don't see a signature of wind going this way, away toward the radar. It's all in one motion. But regardless, that's just kind of the scientific aspect behind it. The damage certainly lined up. And worth noting, there was wind damage in other spots, Washington, Jefferson, Newport, Dover, Foxcroft, Mattawamkeag. But the supercell that came through the Portland area was responsible for a lot of damage. And the other storms were not to the strength that this one was. That's why we've had so much attention and focus on it. You might be wondering, why wasn't this really expected? Frankly, we had a chance for thunderstorms in the forecast, and there wasn't really big forcing. There wasn't a big front coming through or anything like that. It just turned out that because this storm was able to separate from the line, and we didn't have any sea breeze, it was able to make it to the coast and strengthen on approach to the coast. And that's kind of what unfolded there. So I hope you enjoyed a little behind-the-scenes look at the dynamics in the storm and my gripes about the Portland radar, because we got to get those trees knocked down or raise it somehow, because it's getting to the point where if you have a thunderstorm in Portland, parts of York County, it just doesn't do it justice on the most useful lowest tilt of the radar. We can look higher up, but you want to use the lowest one. generally speaking, because it's not like we have mountains blocking it or anything like that. So that's a summary of the storm. The weekend's great. We do have some rain that approaches late Sunday, but I think we get Sunday in dry. And then Monday, a muggier day with showers and storms around. There may be some steadier rain that passes through too. I think the morning, midday, probably wetter than the afternoon on Monday. And then Tuesday, Wednesday looks good. Another front comes in on Thursday with another chance for scattered storms. So that's going to wrap up this summary of Thursday's supercell that went through Portland, South Portland, Cape Elizabeth, Westbrook. That was something to see, and how quickly that thing flared up. It's not something that's all that common, but I'm going to remember and keep in mind, because I have seen before storms moving northwest to southeast like this and strengthening on approach to the coast. So I'll have my guard up a little bit more next time, but that was probably a once in several year type storm to hit the Portland area. All right, thanks for joining us. Have a great weekend. weather-weenies at newscentermaine.com. We'll see you back here next week.